Imagine sitting on a plane just before takeoff. The engines roar, the cabin lights flicker gently, the smell of fuel mingles with the air conditioning. You look out the window and think, in a few moments, I'll be somewhere else, in another life. But what if, seconds later, all that remained of your destination was a muffled recording, hidden in a charred orange box? That's exactly what happened to the passengers of Flight AI-171. And what that box revealed after weeks of silence isn't just surprising, it's unsettling. The story of Air India Flight 171 doesn't begin with a storm, nor with obvious human error. It begins with a deep, dense silence, broken only by a metallic scream, 18 seconds after takeoff. Loss of thrust! We have lost our motivation. And then, the commander's tense voice, "At my house." To understand how this sentence became the centerpiece of one of the most complex investigations in modern aviation, we need to go back a few days to when, amidst the still warm wreckage and the wail of sirens in the background, an orange object lit up on the roof of a hospital dormitory. It was the flight data recorder, nicknamed by many the black box, but ironically painted orange to make it easier to spot among the debris. This small metal cylinder, made of steel or titanium, withstands infernal heat and the force of free fall. It can withstand temperatures of over 100 degrees Celsius and forces greater than those that would crush a freight train. It stores no videos or images, only numbers, data, voices, brief recordings of a few seconds that, together, tell what no one else could. The black box of Flight AI-171 was rushed to the Indian Air Accident Investigation Center. A team of national and international experts was mobilized under the direct supervision of the government. It was a race against time and against oblivion. The civil aviation minister declared that the recorder was the only key to understanding what happened. But were they really prepared for what was about to be discovered? For days, engineers and analysts worked in absolute silence. Every second of the flight was deciphered line by line, and everything seemed normal. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner climbed at an ideal speed and with a perfect bank. The engines hummed like Swiss clockwork. No alarms, no failure, until the 15th second, and then something impossible. It happened. The captain's seat, the number one position in the cockpit, suddenly moved back about 30 centimeters, as if some invisible force had pulled it. An almost comical detail, if not the beginning of the end. Almost instantly, the left engine's throttle lever was returned to the stop. Half a second later, the right engine's throttle followed. Both engines shut down. The plane began to descend, with no thrust or possibility of reaction. But how was this possible? How could an aircraft designed to fly with a single engine failure lose both engines and crash like a stone? The answer was provided by the second element of the black box, the cockpit voice recorder. "Loss of thrust!" shouted the co-pilot. "At my house," replied the captain. And then came the cry that would make anyone who had ever boarded an airplane shudder. "Mayday! No more propulsion! We've lost power! We can't climb!" 26 seconds after takeoff, both engines failed. The plane was only 65 meters above sea level, the height of a 20-story building. 1 second later, silence reigned. 38 seconds later, impact. This entire sequence, from takeoff to tragedy, required less than a single deep breath. The most shocking thing, none of this should have happened. The Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner was the pride of Air India's international fleet. Serviced, maintained, and flown by experienced pilots, it crashed due to a seat movement. But, wait, a seat? Yes. And, by an instinctive reflex, the pilot, while trying to stabilize himself, firmly squeezed the thrust levers. As they were at maximum, this sudden action brought them back and cut the engine. An action that lasted a few milliseconds, but it caused the deaths of more than 200 people. Now think about it. How many times have you reacted reflexively? How many times have you reacted without thinking? How many of those actions could have decided your life, or the lives of others? But perhaps the most worrying question is something else. Why does a seat move by itself during one of the most critical moments of a flight? During the first hours of the investigation, authorities avoided any speculation. But behind the scenes and in official statements, The analysis team was already beginning to piece together a much more complex puzzle, a puzzle of which the sliding seat was only the first piece. When the black box spoke, with its recorded voice and chilling data, the question that resonated among engineers and family members was simple but devastating. Was it a mistake or something that could and should have been avoided? Because if this seat had already had problems before, if there was already a history of failures, if anyone had already been warned, the AI-171 tragedy was therefore not an accident. It was a sentence. And at the heart of this sentence, there is much more to discover. So what made the seat move? And did it move on its own? Have you ever felt that metallic click when you adjust your car seat? That dull thud that tells you, it's locked, it's secure. Oh, now imagine boarding a plane, looking into the cockpit, and realizing that the captain's seat, the one where hundreds of lives are being monitored, can slide out of the way with a single jerk. That's exactly what happened on AI-171, and what seemed like a simple defect actually revealed serious negligence. The first days following the crash were marked by intense emotion. International headlines focused attention on the tragedy. Boeing Dreamliner crashes after takeoff. Mystery surrounds the crash of Flight AI-171. But behind the family's grief, something even more disturbing began to emerge. The cause was neither engine failure, nor a storm, nor technical sabotage. It was the bank, a seat that slipped, a pin that came loose, an inspection that was never performed. Yes, it sounds absurd, too banal, but therein lies the danger. For fatal accidents often don't begin with explosions or conspiracy. They arise from what goes unnoticed, from what is deemed too insignificant to worry about. According to documents reviewed by Indian and international investigators, the captain's seat on Flight AI-171 had already experienced problems. It had been repaired 11 days before the crash. The locking pin, the very one that prevents the seat from sliding on the tracks, had been replaced. But no tests had been conducted after the repair, no checks, no simulations, nothing. The plane had been returned to service, and its fate was sealed. Think about it. How many times have you trusted something without checking it? A bicycle brake? A ladder? A GPS app? Little habits we take for granted. But when the margin for error is zero, like in aviation, a single mistake becomes a judgment. The recreated scene is blood-curdling. The plane climbs. The captain adjusts the control. Suddenly, his seat slides violently backward. By a natural reflex, he grabs the nearest object, the thrust lever, and since they were pushed forward at full power, the sudden pull brings them back to idle. The engines practically stop. He didn't have time to understand, react, or correct. Here, everyday life merges with catastrophe. Everyone acts by reflex. If we stumble, we catch ourselves. If we slip, we look for support. If something moves beneath our bodies, we automatically seek balance. It's not a mistake, it's instinct. And instinct shouldn't have the power to destroy an entire plane. Now let's take a modern aircraft. A Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner worth up to $175 million. Equipped with sensors, redundancies, and advanced software, how is it possible for two engines to be disabled by an inadvertent action? Since there is no physical interlock, no safety mechanism, and no click protection like that found in cars or even the simplest office chairs? At this point, the question ceases to be technical in nature and becomes moral. Because if a simple incident can cause a plane to crash, who should be held responsible? The pilot, who behaved like a normal person? The airline, who failed to test the seat? Or the manufacturer, who designed the system without anticipating the unforeseen? The truth is even more horrific. The case of Flight AI-171 is not an isolated incident. In March 2024, a similar incident occurred on LATAM Airlines. A seat slid off mid-flight. The plane suddenly lost altitude. 50 people were injured. 12 were hospitalized. Tragedy was narrowly averted. And yet, nothing was done. We're talking about chairs, seats, parts that should be as reliable as the fuselage, the engine, the landing gear, and yet they're treated like marginal components. Imagine, what if it wasn't the seat, What if it was the airplane's brake pedal? What if the joystick had been slightly delayed? What if the altitude sensors had reacted a second late? Would you fly like that? But the most disgusting thing about this story is that the sequence that led to AI-171's disappearance was not only predictable, it was known. Documents show that the locking pin was a weak point already identified on previous models. This isn't the first time internal components of advanced aircraft have failed. It's not the first time a series of micro-failures has led to disaster, but perhaps worst of all is how we handle these tragedies afterward, as if they were natural disasters, as if death were inevitable, as if the deaths of hundreds of people were an acceptable sacrifice in the name of industrial efficiency. And as families grieve and experts create charts and timelines of the impact, one question remains: would all this have happened if just one inspection had been carried out? Ultimately, this wasn't a sophisticated terrorist act, cyber-sabotage, or an uncontrollable technical failure. It was a bank, just a bank. An object present on every airplane in the world that should never move without orders. And if we think about it, how many things in our daily lives work this way? How often do we blindly trust poorly tested structure, hasty decisions, systems that promise perfection but ignore the essential? How many personal or collective tragedies occur because someone thought it wasn't that important? AI-171 disintegrated into ashes in less than 40 seconds. The smoke of neglect still hangs. The black box has spoken. But the question remains, who will really listen? And even worse, who will act? If this content has made you think, and you believe that such stories need to be told with depth and responsibility, subscribe to the channel now. Click the like button. This way, we can reach even more people with our work. Because as long as there is silence in the face of avoidable tragedies, we will be there to make the black box speak. And what it reveals can change more than you can imagine. Are you ready to find out what happened to AI-171? Because from there, even darker things come to light. And the next revelation will make you wonder what's behind every flight you've ever taken. Why did the commander's seat move by itself? There should be a simple answer to this question, but there isn't. And the more thoroughly the AI-171 case is studied, the more it defies simple explanation. What was supposed to be a technical accident turns into something more complex, rather unpleasant, and much more disturbing. Yes, the locking pin had been replaced a few days earlier. Yes, there were no further tests. But does that justify the crash of one of the world's most modern aircraft less than 40 seconds after takeoff? Does this play really carry, on its own, the full weight of the tragedy? Or is this just a smokescreen over something that has yet to be revealed? Here is the alternative theory. Theories that may seem exaggerated at first glance, but in light of aviation history and institutional response patterns, they deserve to be heard. One name stands out among the experts: Jadhav, former technical advisor to a major Indian airline. He does not believe the accident was caused solely by a defective seat. For him, there is one factor that has not been taken into account with the necessary seriousness: the possibility of external interference. And here's an uncomfortable question. Is it technically possible to intervene in the navigation systems of a modern aircraft? According to Jadhav, the answer is yes. Systems such as GPS, navigation networks, and even auto steering can be interrupted, blocked, or even redirected by external agents with the appropriate knowledge and equipment. This has already happened with military drones, satellites, and in some cases, even commercial aircraft. But even he admits a limit. The engine in particular, it cannot be disabled remotely. The reason? The systems that control the operation of the turbines are isolated and protected by physical and digital layers that prevent remote shutdown. A human gesture was necessary to stop the two engines of the AI-171. A physical order, a hand pulling levers, or something that gave that impression. So let's go back to the beginning. The seat, the reflection, the human impulse. But before you're convinced, another theory surfaces: bird strike. Does this sound absurd? Maybe. But during takeoff, It is one of the biggest dangers for any aircraft. According to experts, even a single bird sucked into a turbine can cause serious damage. What happens if two birds hit different engines at the same time? An almost certain catastrophe. Now add one more ingredient. Ahmedabad, the airport from which Flight AI-171 took off, is considered one of the most critical airports in India in terms of bird strikes. The intense heat of the region, especially in summer, attracts dozens of birds that fly around the airport. There are so many that in recent years, local authorities have declared a red alert due to the increasing risk of collision. A similar precedent occurred in South Korea when a plane taking off from Jeju Island lost thrust seconds after takeoff. The suspect? Birds in the engines. But this explanation, although possible, does not convince everyone. Aviation veterans say the chances of the two engines be obstructed by birds at the same time, it's 1 in a million. And even if one engine fails, the Boeing 787 is designed to continue flying with the other engine still operating. So why were both engines shut down at the same time? Why did none of the emergency call systems respond? Why did the plane fall like a stone with no chance to glide or dodge? The answer takes shape when the analysis no longer focuses on the incident itself, but begins with observation, the design of the aircraft. And what comes next is even more serious. Boeing internal reports, which have never been made public before, indicate that long-standing concerns about the 787 series seat latch system. During tests with high-frequency vibration, which often occur during takeoffs and landings, the engineers even recorded slight slippage. They also warned that the locking pin could fail in flight if it was not tightened with enough force, or if it became worn after several maintenance operations. Do you know what they did with that warning? Nothing. The document was not even forwarded to the council, not even the risk prevention, not even to the authority. This is not just a technical error. This is a deliberate omission. And there, the story changes color, from technical gray to alarm red. In professional forums, former Boeing employees began to denounce what they called culture of denial, an environment in which warnings are ignored, where risk is treated as a statistic, and where the deaths of hundreds of people only become a crisis when they appear in the news. We have already seen this, writes an anonymous engineer. It's not a technological problem, it's a mentality problem, and that mentality is costing lives. But the question that must now be asked is even more confusing. If Boeing had already been warned, why didn't the company act? To save time? Money? Avoid production delays? Are you afraid to admit your mistakes and open the door to legal action? It wouldn't be the first time. The Boeing 737 MAX disasters are still fresh in people's memory. Two tragedies, more than 340 dead. And only after a year did Boeing admit the deficiencies in the MCAS system, which was responsible for the fact that the nose of the plane was pushed down against the will of the pilot. In this case, the error was an algorithm. AI-171 is a seat, but the pattern is the same. A minimal error, a human reflection, a relentless system, and a company that remains silent. And then comes the question that can change everything. Are we really talking about a random tragedy? Or was it written long ago and buried in ignored reports and never reviewed internal decision? The public wants answers, families want justice, and the aviation world is holding its breath. Because if a seat pin can cause a Dreamliner to crash, what else will happen quietly on your next flight? If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like now. It's not just about planes, it's a question of responsibility, about flying safely, about what lies behind the promises of technology and comfort. Help us spread this truth to more people. There is still much to be revealed. And in the next episode, you'll learn how the biggest name in world aviation tried to cover up the truth again. Do you really think Boeing just stood by and did nothing? Or did she know and decide to do nothing? Imagine a 100-story building. Each floor represents a system, each system a life. And at the very top, in a silent room, the leaders make decisions. Now imagine that, somewhere between the ground floor and the roof, someone discovers a crack in the structure. Invisible to the public, it doesn't cause panic. Yet it's there, and those at the top decide to ignore it. Flight AI-171 was that building, and what collapsed wasn't just a plane, it was a culture. After the initial technical reports, the investigation delved deeper into Boeing's background. What was revealed could have been the stuff of an economic thriller, except that the victims aren't fictional characters. More than 200 families never received a call. And, once again, it all starts with a document. This document, signed by 2 experienced engineers from Boeing's cockpit design department, warned of a real risk. The 787 series seat locking pin could break under certain conditions. Internal tests showed micro-slippage during vibration simulation. The recommendation was clear: revise the system, strengthen the mechanism, and add redundancy. But this report never reached the board of directors. It wasn't even forwarded to the department responsible for implementing the changes. Pause narrative. Have you ever wondered how often a company ignores a warning for fear of losing money? How many meetings end with phrases like, "This can wait"? Now think of the cost of that silence when lives are at stake. Boeing didn't immediately respond to the tragedy. This isn't new. In the 2 fatal 737 MAX crashes, Lion Air in 2018 and Ethiopian Airlines in 2019, it took the airline more than a year to acknowledge the MCAS system's involvement. Meanwhile, the planes continued to fly. Passengers continued to board, unaware of what awaited them. And the same scenario was playing out again today. As the world struggled to understand why a plane crashed in less than 40 seconds, Boeing remained completely silent. No press conference, no explanation, no admission of design flaws. Even worse, according to information from investigative journalists and leaks in specialist forums, the company had already been warned about the risks of the sliding seat at least 3 times before the AI-171 accident. The internal response? Acceptable operational risk. This expression may sound bureaucratic, but it carries considerable weight. What is acceptable to decision-makers can be fatal to those on a plane going nowhere. Unexpected story. A former Boeing safety manager, who wished to remain anonymous, uncovered an even more obscure case. In 2022, an engineer inspecting a Dreamliner noticed unusual wear on a seat's latch mechanism. When he reported the anomaly, he was asked not to formally document it because the part was within tolerance. The now retired engineer said, "I knew it could cause a disaster. I just didn't imagine so many people would be flying it." Outrage erupted outside Boeing headquarters. Engineer forums, social media, and unions made their voices heard. The hashtag #Million-Seat went viral, not because of the seat's value, but because of the human cost of this negligence. The international press demanded answers. Why had a company with government contracts, access to the world's most advanced technology, and decades of experience failed to correct such a fundamental error? And then the answer became clear. It was not a technical error, but a cultural error. A corporate culture that prioritizes delivery times over safety warning, that neglects testing in favor of productivity reports, that views every flight as a financial gain and every death as a calculated burden. Pause narrative. This is where the narrative changes, from accident investigation to system complaint. The AI-171 tragedy is no longer just a one-off failure. She became a symbol, a mirror, a cry. Meanwhile, the victims' families waited for answers. Air India, a subsidiary of the Tata Group, offered 10 million rupees, about $116,000 per victim, a symbolic amount that did little to assuage the grief and outrage. Legal experts warned that the final amount could be significantly higher, especially if the cases were taken to international courts. But even this figure contains a cruel irony. The defective seat that sealed the AI-171's fate cost less than $10,000. The plane itself cost more than $150 million. The value of the lives lost? Immeasurable. The chain of responsibility extends far beyond the cockpit. It stretches from the hangar to the boardroom, from the shop floor to the decision-making room. And now that the world knows Boeing has been alerted, the question is no longer, how could this happen? It is, What happens when a company is bigger than the debt it carries? Because Boeing isn't just an aircraft manufacturer. It's a symbol of American technological superiority, a pillar of the defense industry, a name that carries weight on Wall Street, at NASA, and in the halls of the Pentagon. And when such a company makes mistakes, who has the courage to hold them accountable? Unexpected statistic. According to the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, approximately over the past decade, 80% of civil aviation safety incidents have been caused by human error or business decision, not unpredictable factor. In other words, most disasters could have been avoided, but it wasn't. The story of AI-171 is a painful portrait, a portrait where the errors are minimal, but the consequences are colossal. It all begins with a change of headquarters and ends in columns of smoke above a residential neighborhood. And yet, Boeing refuses to take responsibility. None of its executives have commented. No letters have been sent to the family. No preventative measures have been announced. Time passes, but the black box has spoken. The data has been released. The reports have been published. And the survivors, the families, the experts, the ordinary citizens, have not forgotten. Last provocation. How many more must fall before those already crying out are heard? If you've read this far, it's because you think this story deserves to be told. Share this video, like it, subscribe to the channel to stay informed about the investigation. Because in Part 5, we will reveal the financial implication, the legal context, and the question that most concerns the aviation world today. Will this tragedy bring justice, or will it be just another case buried beneath the footprints of a giant who never stops flying? Let's go all the way together until someone finally answers. How much is a life worth? No airline, no aircraft manufacturer, no executive in a tie will answer this question honestly on camera. But behind the scene, in internal reports, during salary negotiations, this figure exists. It is coldly calculated in dollars, in rupees, in percentages of risk, and in the case of Flight AI-171, it is etched on the revealed flaw in a system that already knew what was happening and did nothing. The crashed Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner was no ordinary aircraft. It was a symbol of an era of progress. It was the pride of Air India. It was the plane that many fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters had boarded, believing they were flying one of the safest aircraft in the world. And, ironically, it destroyed the very thing that was supposed to protect them, the system itself. The defective part, the seat locking pin, cost less than $10,000. The plane destroyed, up to $175 million. The damage? Estimated at more than $100 million. The fuselage structure alone, insured for about $80 million, was reduced to ashes. And behind every cold number is a name. A story that ended in 38 seconds of despair. But will there be justice? Air India has announced temporary relief of about $116,000 per family. International lawyers warn, however, that this is only a beginning. If victims file lawsuits in countries like the United States, where tort law is strict and historic, the sums could multiply, not out of greed, but for a reason that can never be restored: trust. Trust that the manufacturer of a $150 million aircraft prioritizes human integrity over delivery deadline. Trust that safety reports won't be ignored like forgotten memories in your inbox. Trust that flights will remain safe, not just likely. And at the heart of it all is a question the whole world wants answered. Is Boeing responsible? If it turns out that the company ignored technical warnings, failed to redesign the seat, and continued production despite proven risks, it will face an unprecedented wave of lawsuits. Because, unlike accidental errors, this is a tragedy caused by a conscious decision not to listen, to let things slide, to treat a seat as something less important. But the worst part wasn't the numbers or the reports. It was the reflex that brought about the end. A simple human impulse, a natural instinct for perseverance, was enough to shut down two engines in a system designed to protect itself from human error. The biggest mistake was placing too much emphasis on perfect behavior under stress. And here's the hard truth. The fault was not the pilot. The mistake was made by the person who designed a booth where a reflection could knock everything over. Those who tested it knew the risks and still haven't installed a mechanical lock. From someone who saw a warning and said, "This can wait." Such errors don't happen by chance. They occur because a comprehensive model allows them. A model that prioritizes delivery, treats risks as numbers, and turns casualties into compliance reports. And even under pressure, Boeing remains silent. No statement acknowledging the damage to the seats, no plans to overhaul the system, no public promise of change. The same silence as after the 737 MAX crash. The same scenario, the same coldness. But today, the world is more interested. The truth has a new ally. Digital memory, forums, independent channels, videos like this one. It's no longer just the black box talking. Information has burst the bubble, and it won't go away. So if you've seen this far, you know it's not just a theft. It's about having confidence every time you step on a plane. It's about every invisible decision someone makes for you long before you leave. This is about demanding accountability when it has been swept under the carpet. And now that you know, what are you going to do with it? If you believe such stories should be told truthfully and in detail, subscribe to the channel now. Turn on notifications to stay up to date with upcoming reveals. Like this video to help this message reach more people. And comment below, do you think Boeing will be held accountable? Or will this be another forgotten case? We read everything. Every vote counts. And only together can we work towards a future in which flying is more than a statistical gamble. Thank you for following us this far. In the next episode, we reveal another dark aviation story, hidden for years until the truth came out. Prepare, because when the industry tries to cover its tracks, we follow the smoke. See you there.